Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever looked at a world map and just seen, well, a bunch of random outlines? We're kind of trained from a young age to think of these borders as just simple pictures, right? Maybe some colorful decorations on a page. But in this explainer, we're going to completely challenge that basic assumption. A map? It's actually a blueprint of a machine, a massive physical machine that dictates exactly how people live, how they govern, and how they connect. Today, we're exploring the incredible reality of how a country's shape changes, literally, everything.
Which leads us to a pretty fundamental question. Why does country shape even matter in the first place? Well, think of a country kind of like a human body. If it's compact and round, everything is close together and super easy to reach. But if it's stretched out, communication takes way longer, and the extremities can start to feel totally disconnected from the heart. So a country's outline is actually this highly dynamic spatial system. It determines how fast you can travel, how easily a central government can reach its citizens, and how different regions develop their own totally unique identities.
So here's the absolutely crucial point to wrap our heads around. Geography is not just where land is. It is how land organizes life. That's our core definition of a spatial system. Now, shape isn't 100% destiny, but it absolutely sets the stage. Geography acts as a set of very real, very heavy physical pressures on human organization. It decides what becomes incredibly easy for a nation to do and what becomes incredibly hard. To really understand these spatial systems, we're going to use two completely different mental models. We have the long hallway, represented by Chile, versus the large house, represented by the United States. We're going to start by looking at the extreme physical constraint of Chile, and then we'll compare that to the wide-open, expansive spread of the US. Keep these two really powerful images in your head as we go.
All right, part one, Chile, the line country. This is a place where distance is a daily reality. Chile is, without a doubt, one of the clearest examples on Earth of shape acting as a physical force. I mean, it is stretched like a tight ribbon from north to south, making distance this inescapable, everyday reality that totally separates regional experiences.
Just imagine you're standing at one end of a really long hallway in a house. If you yell to someone at the far end, that sound reaches them much later and much weaker than if you were just hanging out in the same room, right? Well, Chile works exactly like that. Events, trade, even cultural shifts that happen in one end of the country don't instantly reach the other. This naturally separates the north, the center, and the south into almost entirely different worlds.
But it's not just that Chile is exceptionally long. On the east, you've got the towering Andes Mountains. On the west, the massive Pacific Ocean. So Chile is heavily compressed between these two immense natural forces. And they act exactly like thick house walls. Yes, they brilliantly protect the country from outside threats, making the borders super easy to define, but they also isolate it. There's virtually zero room to expand sideways.
So think of Chile as a tall, narrow bottle. If you pour water into a tall bottle, the water has absolutely no choice but to stack upward. Because sideways expansion is entirely blocked by the mountains and the ocean, all human organization, we're talking transportation, settlement, infrastructure, it's all forced to stack linearly. You don't usually travel across Chile, you literally travel up and down Chile.
And because it stretches so incredibly far up and down the globe, it crosses multiple massive climate zones. It's essentially a giant bookshelf of climates. You've got this harsh, dry desert in the north, gorgeous, temperate Mediterranean conditions in the center, and freezing fjords and heavy rain down in the south. This extreme shape forces the people living there to adapt to completely different ways of building homes, farming, and surviving, all while sitting on the exact same national bookshelf.
So how in the world do you manage a country with such an extreme shape? Well, if a country is long, the middle often becomes the most practical place to manage from. This is exactly why Santiago and the central region completely dominate Chile's population and economy. It's not just some political accident, it is the simple physics of the map. If you're trying to hold and balance a very long rope, the absolute easiest place to operate from is the midpoint. The geography literally pulls power straight toward the center.
Moving on to part two, the USA, the network country, and the idea of coherence across scale. Now, it is incredibly tempting to just look at a map and think of the United States as simply a much bigger version of Chile, but that completely misses the point. The US has a fundamentally different shape, which creates an entirely different kind of system. It's a system pressured to manage massive regional diversity across a truly vast scale.
Let's contrast Chile's narrow bottle with a totally new analogy, the wide bowl. If you pour water into a wide bowl, it doesn't just stack upward in a line, right? It spreads out easily in many different directions.
Most of the lower 48 states aren't trapped between one giant mountain wall and one ocean wall. The U.S. has enormous stretches of totally buildable land, allowing transport networks, massive cities, and political power to just spread out and develop expansively across multiple corridors. Because there's massive physical room to spread out, you get a true network of distinct regions. You have the Midwest plains absolutely dominating agriculture, the Southwest deserts dealing with heavy water constraints, the Pacific coast driving ocean access and global trade, and the Mountain West defined by extreme elevation and distance. Because they have the physical room to breathe and expand, these regions develop completely different, geographically driven economies, all while still existing inside one massive bowl.
Let's smash these two structural concepts together using a communication analogy. Think of Chile as a walkie-talkie chain. Messages and resources have to be passed sequentially in a rigid, straight line, from one node to the next. The US, on the other hand, operates like a massive hub-and-spoke system. You have multiple central hubs bursting outward, interacting in dozens of different directions simultaneously.
This all leads to a core difference in spatial habits. Basically, Chile is the ribbon and the US is the sheet. This isn't just a basic observation about total square mileage, you know? It's about the very fabric of how the nation can actually be used. A ribbon is long, yes, but it can really only point in one direction. But a broad sheet, you can fold it, divide it, and utilize it in dozens of different, complex ways.
Which brings us to part 3, line versus network systems, and how shape structures power. This is where we synthesize everything we've talked about so far in this explainer. Because these physical shapes fundamentally dictate exactly how governments and massive infrastructure projects must be built just to survive.
When we look at their core systemic problems, the contrast is just incredibly revealing. Chile's primary geographic challenge is simply staying connected along a line. It must constantly fight to keep its far-flung northern and southern ends connected to that vital center. The U.S.'s primary challenge, though, is managing scale across a network. It literally has to rely on complex layers of government, like powerful state governments, simply to coordinate massive diversity across a huge, wide area. The physical structure of the country absolutely nudges the political structure inside it.
This really cements everything into a few ultimate aha moments for us. Chile's long and narrow shape creates a serious north-south pressure. It's constrained tightly by the Andes and the Pacific, which forces a reliance on a strong central axis. The U.S., being broad and expansive, battles regional spread and is constrained mostly by the sheer logistics of its massive territory, which, in turn, allows it to thrive on multiple interacting hubs.
Take a second to really absorb this major takeaway. Chile is organized by length. The United States is organized by scale and spread. This is a profound shift in thinking. You aren't just memorizing boring geography facts anymore. You are actively interpreting cause and effect. You're seeing exactly how the literal dirt, rock, and water beneath our feet shape the destiny, the economics, and the very identity of millions of people.
So, I want to leave you with this final empowering question. When you look at a map now, what system do you see? The next time you look at a globe or open an atlas, don't just see colorful globs or random borders. Look for the lines. Look for the clusters, the wide networks. Ask yourself, where would connection be easy here, and where would it be nearly impossible? You are now equipped with a totally new lens to read and decode literally any map you ever see. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the spatial world around you.